Junaport Kiwanuk. My name is Kelf Treuner. I come from the city of Dresden. And 25 years ago, I had the possibility to work in the office of Imre Makovecz as a young architect. And I'm here today because I would like to support the idea of to realize the St. Michael's project. Therefore, I would like to talk about a big project in Dresden that also had to encounter various problems, but in the end it could be realized successfully. It is the Frauenkirche. The Frauenkirche, or Church of Our Lady, is the dominant building on Neumarkt Square in Dresden. It was built between 1726 and 1743 by Augebert, the master carpenter of Dresden. It was destroyed in the Second World War. Then it rebuilt between 1993 and 2005. The church has a square central building measuring about 45 meters on each side. Over the four rounded corners, there are towers holding the bells and the clock. The bell-shaped dome, the only one of its kind in the world, is 62 meters high. There's a lantern and a golden cross on the top of the church at a height of 91 meters. The Frauenkirche is made entirely by Saxon sandstone, the typical building material in Dresden. The main circular space inside is ringed by 8 narrow columns. It has a diameter of 23 meters. Between the columns, there are 5 galleries. Before 1945, there was a space for 3,000 people, and now, after reconstruction, it is more comfortable. There are nearly 2,000 places. The galleries and the rows of the seats face the chancel in the east. The chancel holds a pulpit and the altar with a painting of Jesus on the Mount of Olives. Originally, there was a famous organ above the chancel, which was first played in 1736 by Johann Sebastian Bach. Under the main room is the vaulted basement, used as a crypt in the 18th century. Today it holds a prayer room. Over the main room is a dome shaped like a semicircle which cannot be seen from outside. This has a height of 37 meters. A large opening connects the main room of the church with the outer dome. Between the outer and the inner walls of the outer dome, a spiral lamp leads to the lantern. This offers a unique view over Dresden. The Frauenkirche is described as Europe's most monumental Protestant church buildings and one of the most important buildings of the 18th century in Germany and Saxony. Not long after it was built in 1743, people already knew how unique the Frauenkirche was. The building became a symbol of Dresden's cultural high point in the 18th century, as countless artists created images of the building on the Neumarkt Square. Here a painting from Canaletto. However, the massive weight of the stone dome, about 12,000 tons, created problems right from the start. The foundation and the narrow columns were all much too weak to hold the massive weight. Even before the Frauenkirche was completed, large numbers of cracks formed in the overloaded columns. They sank too far into the ground, creating more and more damages. Soon the dome, too, was crisscrossed with cracks, as 4 iron ring anchors which were used were too weak. In 1738, some people already suggested taking the dome down again. But this was no option. Repairs were needed again and again over the next 200 years. There was also serious water damage, as the stone surface of the dome was never really protected against water. In 1938, the condition was so bad that the Frauenkirche needed to be closed. Major safety works was then carried out until 1942, led by the structural engineer Georg Rüth. The foundations were made stronger and countless flattened stones were replaced. The cracks in the columns were filled and columns were protected against the excess weight of using iron bands. Finally, 2 steel reinforced concrete rings were built in the dome to take up the shear force from the rounded dome. The state-of-the-art safety work organized by Rüth set an excellent example in this time. At the same time, the inside of the church was fully renovated. In the night from February the 13th to the 14th in 1945, Dresden was almost totally destroyed by 2 airstrikes by the Royal and the US Air Forces. A total of near 15 square kilometers of the city was reduced to rubble and ashes. The Frauenkirche also fell victim in the firestorm. The stalls and galleries caught fire, and the heat of almost 1,000 degrees weakened the overloaded columns even more, so the dome fell in 1 day later, leaving a massive pile of rubble. Only the choir area and the outer walls of the northwest stair tower were left standing. The Neumarkt Square around the church was also totally destroyed. Even so, directly after 1945, there was no question among the people of Dresden the church would be rebuilt one time. The people identified too strongly with the famous building. The Frauenkirche was still a symbol for the city, despite its destruction. Building conservationists began preparing for reconstruction. As early as 1948, large numbers of stones were taken from the pile of rubble and catalogued. The ruins were protected against vandalism. In 1950, work on restoring the rubble had to stop because there was not enough funding. The building conservationists concentrated on recording all the information they need to rebuild the Frauenkirche. If there was ever a chance to rebuild the church, they did not want to lose any time. Until then, the rubble had to be protected against the constant threat of removal. At first, the church also supported the rebuilding of the Frauenkirche. That changed as the GDR was founded in 1949 and became a more and more anti-religious state. The pressure on the church was so high that such a big building project was nearly impossible at this time. After 1945, the architects and the city of Dresden did not deal with the Frauenkirche in the same way. Some plans for rebuilding the Dresden aimed to make the city more open, with fewer buildings. Other plans were more traditional, aiming to recreate the urbanic situation before the war. But many of the plans did not include rebuilding the Frauenkirche. In the years that followed, people never forgot the historical city plans around Neumarkt Square. But the plan of rebuilding the famous church was never taken up. In 1958, the Communist Party ruled that the traces of the war in the GDR cities should be cleared away as much as possible until 1962. However, rebuilding Neumarkt Square and the Frauenkirche together was too expensive, so the area on the square was closed off from the rest of the city center. So, one of Europe's lovely squares, was now a sad, grassy area with the ruins of the Frauenkirche in the center. In 1967, the pile of rubble was officially declared as a memorial and reminder of the horrors of the war, which should be preserved until it could be reconstructed sometime in the future. From 1982, the people of Dresden left thousands of candles in front of the ruins every year to remember the city's destruction. When the Berlin Wall came down in November 1989, a citizen action group decided that it was now finally time to start rebuilding. At first, this was a group of 22 Dresden art historians, building conservationists, architects, people from the church, historians, and normal citizens. The world-famous trumpet player, Ludwig Güttler, agreed to represent the group. His fame and personal commitment made all the difference to the success of the project. On February the 12th, 1990, 45 years after the destruction of Dresden, the action group asked the public for help in its call from Dresden. In the beginning, it was hard to realize this plan. About the same numbers of people in Dresden were for and against this plan to reconstruct the church. Importantly, the church rejected the project, saying that the construction was not right for this time, it was too big, it was too expensive, and there were not enough churchgoers in this time. The Protestant church saw the ruins as an important memorial which should be not destroyed. In their opinion, it was more important to build homes or to support the third world. In 1991, the heads of the construction department at the German regional churches all rejected the rebuilding. The building conservationists outside Saxony, the majority of the architects and the left-wing intellectuals in Dresden were also against the reconstruction. They cited the Viennese Charter, which rules out reconstruction work, and instead suggested building an ugly glass and steel housing in the shape of the Frauenkirche. Anything should be possible, just not a complete reconstruction. But the Citizen Action Group did not give up her plans and continued to look for support. The breakthrough came in March of the same year. The Saxon bishop Johannes Hempel changed his mind and argued that the wounds should not be artificially kept open. They should be healed. The reconstruction should include ruins to keep the scars of history always open. But the idea of reconciliation was more important for him now. The Protestant regional church then decided the forming a foundation for the reconstruction, through refusing the provide funding. On February 1992, Dresden City Council agreed to the plans and voted to pay 10% of the cost. The path was clear for rebuilding the Frauenkirche. After almost 3 years of preparation, in June 1994, a foundation was established by the state of Saxony, the city of Dresden, and the Protestant regional church. This foundation task was to organize the construction project and to collect the needed money. The foundation started with an amount of 3 million euros. With taxes and administration costs, the total amount was nearly 180 million euros. Half of the costs were supposed to come from donations. Dresdner Bank agreed to work on the project, with some bank managers taking a personal interest in the reconstruction. So the bank organized a donor certificate campaign as an example where people could adopt a stone by donating money. The campaign not only helped publicize the idea of reconstruction, but also made donors identify more strongly with the Frauenkirche. Altogether, by 2005, over 65 million euros were attracted in this way. Also important to mention is that the public German TV channel ZDF supported the reconstruction for more than 10 years, advertising the project in many programs. The support association, which grew out of the Citizen Action Group, is still active today. Its work played a key role in making the project very well known. Numerous of other fundraising groups in and outside Germany were founded. They organized more than 1,500 charity concerts, a lot of exhibitions, presentations, guided tours of the ruins and the building site. Numerous promotional items raised donations. Maybe the most well-known product is a watch with the original piece of sandstone from the ruins. A large number of editions were produced today. This alone made over 6 million euros. Ludwig Güttler, the world-famous trumpet player, used his concert to promote the reconstruction. Altogether, the fundraising society bought a donation of more than 30 million euros. International support was very important for the reconstruction of this church in terms of goodwill. Fundraising groups were formed in Switzerland and France. Two groups especially adopted the key concept of reconciliation as their own. The British Dresden Trust was founded in 1993 with the aim of paying for the new cross and on the dome of the Frauenkirche. More than 600,000 pounds were collected, including a donation by Queen Elizabeth. The cross has topped the new Frauenkirche since 2004. In 1995, the German-American scientist Günter Blobel formed the Friends of Dresden in New York to publicize this idea of rebuilding in the United States and to collect donations there. When Blobel was awarded the Nobel Prize of Medicine in 1999, he donated almost his all prize money, that was over 800,000 euros, to the reconstruction. Construction work began in January of 1993. The first step for the archaeologists to clear the rubble from the ruin. The plan was for an archaeological reconstruction, integrating the parts of the ruins which were still standing and usable stones. Until May 1994, the 22,000 cubic meter pile of rubble was taken away stone by stone, with 100,000 stones ready to use again, including about 8,400 stones from the facade. Today, 1/3 of the rebuilt Frauenkirche is made from original materials. There were some special finds in this time. The fallen cross from the dome, the altar, and the grave of the builder George Bär, which was founded on the end. Archaeological. There are no. No. Archaeological reconstruction meant rebuilding the Frauenkirche entirely in sandstone, as in the 18th century. In the nearby region of Saxon Switzerland, some stones were cut from the same quarries where George Bär once found them. The original structural plans were used by avoiding the problems with the historical building. Certain improvements were made to stop cracks from forming. The stonework was built in a much better quality. All the stones from the columns with a heavy load were checked to make sure they were really strong enough. And the joints between the stones were as small as even possible. One especially important feature was to use a large number of pre-stressed steel anchors. They act against the shear stress in the dome and hold a structure together. Another ring anchor at the base of the dome conducts some of the load from the dome to the outer walls, reducing the load of the columns. It was also impossible to reuse the foundation, which were made stronger already in 1938. Like the 18th century building, the new Frauenkirche is made almost entirely of sandstone. Only a really small number of arcs are made from brick. During the reconstruction, it was the idea to keep the building site open to the public as much as possible, to give the people always the necessary trust in the project. There was a great public participation in the reconstruction. From December 1993, church services were held at the building site. Every day, there were guided tours on the building site. Until 1995, an underground construction was built around 3 sides of the church. In 1996, the bottom floor was built and the reconstruction was now clearly visible from outside. Since this time, the reconstructed walls of the crypt have been used as a lower church for prayer and worship. In the following years, the church building grew up quickly, thanks to the generous donations. In 1999, construction reached the top ledge on the main building, and in 2000, the ruined parts were completely joined to the new building. The first concerts were held in the unfinished church. 1 year later, the inner dome was completed. And in 2003, the main dome was finished. One highlight was the arrival and hanging of the 7 new bells. When the cross was placed on the dome in June the 30th of 2004, the outside of the building was ready. Work began in the inside of the building already in 2001. After endless discussions and attempts, it was possible to recreate the original appearance. It was incredible that 80% of the altar could be restored from original stones, using 2,000 pieces of rubble. To remember the horrors of the war, signs of destruction were left visible, especially at the base of the dome. In October the 30th, in 2005, the Frauenkirche was reopened again, 60 years after its destruction. The people's overwhelming willingness to make donations meant that the reconstruction was finished 1 year earlier than planned, within the planned budget. This is not given for such a complex project in Germany today. These numbers are impressive. In 2005, about 13,000 people around the world were organized in groups working reconstruct the Frauenkirche, including more than 7,000 people in the Dresden Fundraising Society alone. Of the total costs of 180 million euros, about 55% or 100 million euros came from private donations made until to the end of 2005. So the rebuilding of the Frauenkirche is thus an impressive demonstration of the success of civic engagement in Germany. The rebuilding of the Frauenkirche was the most important impulse for the reconstruction of the Neumarkt Square around the church. The city planners, as well as the majority of the building conservationists and most of the architects in Dresden, were against building reconstructions to give the Frauenkirche a situable surrounding. But not everyone agreed to this idea. The Citizen Action Group, Gesellschaft Historischer Neumarkt, founded in 1999, was strongly in favor for reconstructing the Neumarkt more closely to the original. As a result, the same discussions began before the reconstruction of the Frauenkirche a few years earlier. But here too, the power of images and engagement, the engagement of the Citizen Action Group made all the difference. Those in favor of modernism did not win against the mostly traditional reconstruction of the Neumarkt. Until today, almost two-thirds of the quarters on the Neumarkt have been filled. The fronts of the building facing the square have mostly been reconstructed to look as they did historically. Even today, however, before every building project, there are always bitter discussions about the design of the Neumarkt. But I think there's no other project in Germany in this time like the rebuilding of the Dresden Frauenkirche and the Neumarkt Square. In the last 10 years, Dresden's attraction as a destination for international tourists has risen rapidly. Other German cities, such as Potsdam or Frankfurt, are now following the example set by Dresden. So it is far from being finished, but the Neumarkt Square already is one of the most beautiful and popular squares in Dresden. The square is today comparable maybe with famous Italian squares such as the Piazza Navona in Roma. And all the reconstruction of the Frauenkirche and Neumarkt is a really, really great success story. This is mostly thanks to the engagement of two citizen action groups, which achieved their aims despite all opposition. So the Neumarkt and the Frauenkirche have again become Dresden's most famous symbol, the heart and the soul of the city. Köszönöm szépen.